Welcome to the Practice Brave podcast. I am the host, Brianna Battles, founder of Pregnancy and Postpartum Athleticism and CEO of Everyday Battles. I'm a career strength and conditioning coach, entrepreneur, mom of 2 wild little boys, and a lifelong athlete. I believe that athleticism does not end when motherhood begins, and this podcast is dedicated to coaching you by providing meaningful conversations, insights, and interview topics related to fitness, mindset, parenting, and of course, all the nuances of pregnancy and postpartum. From expert interviews to engaging conversations and reflections, this podcast is your trustworthy, relatable resource for learning how to practice brave through every season in your life. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Practice Brave podcast. Today I'm here with Trisha Cicero, and I'm really excited to talk with her because she is a former retired, MMA athlete, and she's done a really incredible job of pivoting into supporting other women, whether they participate in martial arts or combat sports, or they're just honestly a mom who wants to improve her body composition, her overall health in a sane way. And we're going to talk a little bit about her background as a professional fighter, what that was like, and how that kind of messed with her head and her body image, her thought processes around food, nutrition, and training, and how she has leveraged those experiences to now support other women in a much healthier way. So Trisha, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to share.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your athletic background and what that has looked like for you.
Sure. So I actually started karate when I was 7 years old. So I'm 37 now. So it's been 30 years that I've been involved in it in some way, shape, or form. And when I was a teenager, I did some kickboxing fights, in my teens, early 20s. But at that time, this is, dating myself now, but there was no Ronda Rousey, there was no women in the UFC. So for me as a 20-year-old at that time, it didn't seem like a viable athletic or career path. And props to the women that really stuck with it during that time and that were the pioneers. I took the road of okay, I wanted to do MMA. There's no women in the UFC. What's the point? I won't be able to go very far. So I just kind of stuck to teaching martial arts and went that route of just being a professional teacher and doing all of that. Fast forward a few years later, I had a chance to start training at American Top Team in South Florida. And obviously that's a hotbed. Anybody that knows anything about MMA, it's a hotbed for MMA. And I just started taking jiu-jitsu classes and I thought no, I'm not going to compete. And then I just got sucked into the world and, started my MMA career at that time. So just, from my background of kickboxing and MMA, obviously anybody that's competed before knows it's a very weight-oriented sport. Right. And I was always thicker. I was strong, but thicker, and I am short. So it led to a lot of very crazy weight cuts. And the first couple of times it wasn't so bad because it was the first few times, but over time they would get harder and more difficult to lose the weight. I would gain the weight rapidly in between fights, 25 pounds, sometimes 30 pounds, and then have to cut weight 6 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, depending on how far notice that you have. And it just really messed with my body, And so I ended up, at the end of my career, I was 4-3 as a pro. I was undefeated as an amateur. And I just had gotten to a point in the middle of my career where I actually had dieted myself into having Hashimoto's and having the autoimmune disease because I was competing not only in MMA, but I was also doing jiu-jitsu. So I would do jiu-jitsu and MMA fight, jiu-jitsu tournament and MMA fight, and I never took any breaks. Until at one point my body was just enough. So it's very extreme, very extreme sport.
It is extreme unless you are connected to those worlds and you're we know the kind, I am that kind, or you can see what is almost like a slippery slope it is being in that community because that is very normalized. Maybe when you zoom out and the greater performance realm, what we know about coaching and strength conditioning or nutrition, but that has not reached the combat sports world the way that it needs to. That world is still pretty outdated when it comes to best approaches, especially for women. So talk about what was that breaking point like? What was it? You said Hashimoto's and autoimmune struggles, but what was, I guess, the red flag that was okay, enough is enough. What was that like?
Yeah. So it was 2018. where I competed 3 or 4 times in jiu-jitsu, and I had 3 MMA fights. And they were not like first round knockouts on either side. And then they were like grueling camps, grueling fights, training for IBJJF competitions in between, and every single time cutting weight. There wasn't any of those times in that year of the 6 times that I just floated to the next thing and just maintained my weight. So come January of 2019, I want to take a fight. I had an opportunity and I had to say no, because everything I would normally do, cutting out carbs and cardio, what do all women do when they want to start losing weight? Okay, time to start eating my chicken salad, no more oatmeal, no more nothing. Okay, I'm just going to eat all, avocado, chicken, whatever. Start doing cardio 3 times a day in between my 3 training sessions. And I was not losing weight. I was getting more inflamed, bloated. I was gaining weight, and I was training a ridiculous amount. And I was doing cardio and barely eating anything. And it was at that point, after a few weeks of doing that, 3 or 4 weeks of being like, A, I can't take this fight. B, I need to go to a doctor because something is not right here. Like, this is all my normal things are not working. And there's no way that I'm not burning a ton of calories and barely eating. So that's when I did get blood work done. And they got so worried when they saw my levels, my thyroid antibodies. They sent me straight to get a ultrasound or an x-ray or whatever to see if there was like a tumor, because they were so worried. And thank God there wasn't. And we caught it in time, and I was able to eventually come out of it. But it was scary. It was a wake-up call for sure.
Absolutely. We don't even realize it, because I think we just have been told that more is better, especially in the combat sports scene. It's like more training is better. Like, what's going to make you better at jiu-jitsu or MMA? More jiu-jitsu and MMA, right? So we're told like that is the approach to being good. And then as a society, as women, we've been told that if you want to lose weight, you eat less. But that ends up being a recipe for disaster when you're doing more training and less fueling for that training. Our body does not respond in the ways that you would think it would respond. And I've been there, done that myself, girlfriend. It is brutal, and it's a hard lesson to learn. And it goes against what we feel is accurate or right.
Yeah. No woman who's trying to lose weight or advanced in their athletic career wants to hear that you need to rest and that you shouldn't compete and you shouldn't train. No woman wants to hear that. No woman who's in the combat world at all, even if they're just doing recreationally, wants to hear you need to take a few months off of training. Right. Like, that's a death sentence to a female athlete of any kind, So it was a hard pill to swallow. And I did have to take a good 6 months. I mean, I can't honestly say I didn't train at all, but I had to really peel things back. Even my work balance, I was working too much. I was not sleeping enough, just so much stress on my body that it just kind of broke everything down. So I really had to just peel a lot of things back to heal. And eventually I did fight later that year, and I started working with a coach, and that really turned things around to where I was much more balanced and I wasn't doing the same extremes. And I was able to kind of finish out my MMA career much more healthy than the first 2/3 of it were, for sure.
Well, that's a great, like, that you got to have a little bit of a redemption story to your process, even after having to be sidelined. And I think every person who competes in combat sports, maybe it's a pretty sweeping generalization, but there will be a setback at some point in time, whether it is injury, maybe it's pregnancy, maybe it is just a life change. Like, you enter combat sports, probably jiu-jitsu more so than MMA, knowing like this is a lifetime thing. Like, it's 10 years ish to a black belt, and then you keep participating. Like, there's no end date there necessarily. Maybe with MMA, there's a little bit of more of a window, doors closing at some point in time. But I think that it's so easy to just get lost in that, where there's not a lot of regulation when you're just day in and day out, same kind of training, same kind of approach, and not giving yourself the ability to take a step back. And when you don't do that, you will be set back. It's just a matter of when. And that can be a really hard thing to adapt to.
And what I noticed is the people who were the champions at the top, like Amanda Nunes, like Joanna Jędrzejczyk, like the people at the highest level, they were not driving themselves into the ground the same way maybe some of us were at the lower level, because you always feel that pressure of, I need to catch up, I need to do more, I need to do an extra training. Maybe you don't have all the coaches' oversight, so you get away with doing a little extra. You're going to this person's class, and you're doing this on your own, and they don't really see. And I just noticed, they would recover so much better. They took care of themselves so much better. They didn't get injured in between like I did. They didn't suffer the repercussions that maybe I did, because I was just overdoing it so much and not giving my body that recovery time, physically or with my metabolism or anything. So that's the hard part too, is that, at the top, they're obviously they have the resources to have the best support. But I think where it gets dangerous is a lot of women at the lower levels, or even the recreational levels, they're kind of left to their own devices to listen to whoever they hear things or see things from. So that's why like having a podcast like this is so important, to just spread that awareness.
What is it that is so addictive, especially for women, where it just becomes this cycle of like training more. And if you weren't, maybe I'll do one competition turns into multiple competitions. And like, clearly I can speak to this personally too. Like, I feel like I went full in on Kool-Aid at Blue Belt, and then I've really had to reassess that approach. Then like, shit, like I know better. What am I doing? Like, but it feels like that's almost a weird, inevitable path for women in combat sports.
Yeah. I think it's one of those vicious things where it's like, in some ways, that's the path to success in anything, right? You have to be crazy obsessed with it. You have to be passionate. You have to, want to do it every day, eat, sleep, and breathe it, right? Like that's the kind of pathway to success in any field. And we do love it. So we do want to do it more and more, and we want to become better at it. And I feel like most women who do participate in some sort of combat sport are also just naturally driven. They're naturally type A high achievers. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in something like this where, you're strangling and punching each other and trying to earn your coach's approval and get to the next level and, win tournaments. Like you wouldn't be in it if you weren't like that. So I think it's hard, it just kind of comes with the territory.
Isn't that crazy though? Because I'm like, man, like we are in our late 30s, and like, yet here we still freaking are. It's not like you're in your teens or your early 20s. It's just like that part of you just doesn't die. It just gets leveraged differently at different times. That's been such an interesting thing to kind of experiment with personally, but then also just in having so many other conversations with women who are competing professionally, or just like local tournaments, or honestly, not even competing at all, but they're just wanting to train, and they're wanting to train a little bit more and a little bit more. And then naturally weight does become part of the conversation at some point in time. And before we like dive into kind of chopping up different aspects of that, I will say that, it wasn't until I decided to start competing that I had to like weigh myself for the first time in a long time. Cause I was like, I'm kind of like an all or nothing person, where it was like, before I was like neurotic with the scale. And then I was like, I can't fucking do that anymore. I need to like step away from the scale. But then like out of sight, out of mind wasn't actually super healthy for me either. And then when I had moved to Idaho, I gained a lot of weight, just trying to like be happy and figure out my life. And then competing in jiu-jitsu became a way for me to like, okay, this will give me a reason that feels that I can almost justify for losing weight. Yep. Okay, now I need to weigh myself, but I don't want to know the number because that's going to mind fuck me. So then I'd close my eyes and have Jared look, and then text my girlfriend who was helping me at the time to like set some macros. It was such a slow on-ramp period to getting familiar with like actually weighing myself again, and ultimately improving the relationship I had with food and my body and weight and all of those things. But that was like, I'd say not necessarily maybe a normal pathway for me because of the previous history. I think a lot of people already know what they weigh, are really self-conscious of that. And then the thought is less, got to eat, or got to like, do crazy restrictive things. So for me, jiu-jitsu actually improved my relationship with the scale and my body. But you have to be in a place for that, a place of like readiness. Yeah. Like, all right, I'm willing to tackle this, and it is no longer going to consume me or own me. This is just data. It is just information. It has nothing to do with how fit I am or how worthy I am or how pretty I am. Nope. Detaching from all of that. But that is not necessarily the case for a lot of people. So you work with this population.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what you see.
Well, I mean, even again, in my own experience, I'm not going to lie, I still step on the scale every day and I'm not competing. It's a scar from my life of competing, that I just can't help it. It doesn't even matter what I weigh right now. And I have come to a neutral place where it doesn't bother me. It's more just interesting to me. Like, oh my God, I ate that much yesterday and I lost a pound today. Oh, that's cool. Whatever. Anyways, I gained 2 pounds. Well, of course I did. I ate like an a-hole yesterday, whatever, it's very neutral to me. But when I was competing, especially, it would ruin my day. And my poor husband, who was, my boyfriend at the time in the beginning of my career, like he'd feel the wrath of it first, and it would just set the tone for a terrible day because I didn't lose weight, or I gained half a pound, or I only lost half a pound. And oh my God, but I have this competition. And it was the same for me, Brianna. Like I didn't even own a scale before I started jujitsu.
Yeah.
Didn't care, never cared about my weight through all my years of martial arts. I did a couple kickboxing fights, and when I was done with them, I didn't care. Okay, I don't need to know. It wasn't until I started competing in jiu-jitsu and MMA that it became obsessed. And I see this a lot with women in general. And I see it a lot, especially in the athlete world, where it does just kind of consume women, and they really do judge themselves so harshly by the number of the scale. And the hard thing is, it's like, if somebody is not competing, if I have a client who she's not competing, it doesn't really matter what the number is, then it doesn't really matter. We can look at other data points and be like, but look at your progress photos and look how great you're feeling. You're digesting food better and look how much energy you have. Unfortunately, if you're in a combat sport, the number does matter. So that's what makes it tricky, because it does matter. At the end of the day, if you're an athlete competing in a weight-oriented, you're wrestling, you're doing jiu-jitsu or fighting, you don't get to compete, or maybe don't even get paid unless you're a certain weight. So it just makes such a mind F of pressure. That's just really hard. It's really hard.
Absolutely. And I know for me, I think a lot of times some of the easier advice is, we'll just compete where you're naturally at. Right. But then no one wants to.
Nobody wants to do that.
And like my real reason was like, okay, like I know that I need to get healthier, and this would probably be a really healthy weight class for me to aim for and be at. And now with where I'm at, I basically just I sit at the gi weight of my weight class. So now my cut is really only losing what the gi weighs, which is fine. It's not a dramatic swing.
Yeah.
But I think we have to normalize too. There's a lot of value in just competing with where you're at. You don't have to do a crazy weight cut. You can improve how you feel, which might lead to losing some pounds. But then even if you're mid of your weight class, that's fine. There doesn't have to be a crazy cut associated with competing. There's just different considerations for different people.
Yeah, for sure. And, a lot of factors, right? Height, skill level, what the competition is in either your, in your jiu-jitsu belt level that you're competing at, or if you're fighting, there's serious consequences if you're fighting at your weight, but the person is, 4 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier. There's other ramifications you got to think about for yourself physically, taking that kind of power from somebody who's much bigger than you, so it's hard, and I think it's, as a sport as a whole, men and women, that the weight cutting is just so toxic and unnecessary, because everybody cuts weight. So it's everybody's cutting weight, but if nobody cut weight, everybody would just kind of compete what they are. So it's just so crazy. But I think that I have seen, I think especially with the addition in UFC, and more so in a PFL, as far as the MMA world, they have the higher weight classes for women. Right. And that's huge, because a lot of women that maybe walked around at 160 or 170 pounds thought, oh my God, if I don't cut to 115 pounds or 125 pounds, I'm never going to be able to do this sport. So having more weight classes, and in jiu-jitsu, it's the same, right? There's a lot of weight classes. It helps.
Yeah, it definitely helps a lot, because in the UFC, it's 135, and that is really low weight, honestly, for the majority of women. Yeah. Not even if you look at the majority of athletic women, 135 is on the light side of that spectrum. And I think that we've assigned so much power to different numbers. Where I want to be under 120 pounds. I want to be at 130 pounds or whatever. But that's not necessarily what is healthy or practical for a lot of different women. And I think we have such value attached to certain numbers on the scale. And it doesn't need to be like that. And I've loved during different aspects of even the Olympics, where people say this athlete weighs 185 pounds. And people look at her and they're like, wow, like that is a lot of weight. She doesn't look like that. And I think we just have no, like we don't really know what certain weights look like on different people. And we've just attached a certain value to a number instead.
So true.
Which is really sad to see.
Yeah.
So you're working with a lot of different women who are attached to the combat world, martial arts world, whether they're doing it professionally, amateur, or honestly, just like they go to a couple jiu-jitsu classes a week. What would you say the number one thing is that they struggle with? And then what is your first approach to working with them?
The biggest thing they struggle with is, the gaining the weight in between, like the not being able to maintain, like you got yourself to a beautiful point where you're very close to the weight you compete at. And a lot of the women I work with, they have these huge swings in their weight. And so then they need to take a long time between competing because they gained the weight back and they don't know how to balance maintaining their weight. That is the hardest thing. And so it's a combination of helping them kind of refuel their metabolism and like get to a higher set point so that they're not just always floating between like, oh, I need to compete, so I'm going to cut everything out and I'm only eating 1,000 calories a day, to then either saying F it or just being unaware and consuming God knows how many calories and not really paying attention and not really caring or not really focusing on it. And only having those two extremes. So it's getting to the point where like you're being aware, you're tracking your food, you're at a good maintenance number of food where you're not starving yourself, but you are paying attention to it. You're fueling yourself with the right nutrients and the right kinds of foods so that when it does come time to cut weight, if that's what you're doing, you're starting from up here now. You're starting from 2,000 calories, 2,500, instead of starting at 1,300 calories. And then your body adapts. And then you're like, crap, now I have to eat 600 calories. And I know women, and I've worked with women who told me that. They showed me their own meal plans from dietitians or from their old coaches, or, oh, my teammate gave me the thing that they used. And it's horrifying. Eating nothing but boiled chicken and egg whites for 4 weeks before a fight. No wonder they couldn't perform and they felt like crap, or they missed their period. Or so it's just, it's helping them learn the balance. And for any women, not just ones that compete, because all women do this. When it's time to lose weight, they start at the lowest point. And when they're not trying to lose weight, it's like unawareness or just fuck it, or, it's just not paying attention to it. And then they go on the other side. So it's learning balance. I think
really easy to do. I find that maintenance is way hard, even though maintenance is kind of the key to like being able to essentially eat a lot more and like not have to be super neurotic, but like getting back up there and knowing like the scale might change a little bit, but like I'm not actually physically going to look that different, like where you're kind of okay with that. And you can kind of build that ceiling, I call it, of like your macros, where you're just kind of building your ceiling of macro, I'll quote, allotment, so that you're not as impacted. And then if you have to cut, like you said, you're still able to eat a lot without feeling super deprived. And that is tricky to follow. I think it's almost easier to follow a cut because you're dialed. You're like, all right, I know what I need to do. Just got to get my shit together. It's like a few more weeks of this. Like, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I was like, all right, focus, like stop eating freaking chips, woman. You know what I mean? But like outside of that, it's really easy to just have to like not want to track maintenance. Yeah. Or it doesn't feel like it has a point. Yet, honestly, it's probably the most important part of establishing better health all the time and better hormonal balance. If you have autoimmune issues, keeping you safer in training, our hormones affect our tissues, affect our output. Like so many different aspects are affected by this. You cannot live in a cut state for long without seeing some kind of repercussion.
Yeah. And I truly believe like if you don't take the time to recover, unfortunately, your body will make you. Whether that manifests in an injury, an autoimmune disease, you not being able to lose weight, at a certain point, your body, if you don't take the time to recover, your body is going to just break. It's going to get sick. Something is going to happen. I truly believe every injury, besides some freak ones that just were because somebody took me down and my foot got stuck and my knee went the other way. But a lot of times, certain injuries or times where I got sick or got staph or, like things like my immune system was shot. I wasn't recovering. I was over dieting, overtraining, and then this happened to take me out. And so I truly believe it's like, it's such an important part, but it's so missed. It's just something that's just so, especially in the combat world. I feel like in maybe other sports, like a bodybuilding world, they're more used to the cycles of dieting and they're used to going up to certain amounts. In the combat world, I feel like many combat athletes don't even know how to track macros. They want meal plans. They want me to tell them what to eat. My old coach, or I had a dietitian who did this, and that's fine. But I truly feel the best, in my opinion, is to be aware of how much your body truly needs and to be able to make your own decisions, because you don't want me to tell you what to eat. You might not like what I tell you what to eat, right? And then you have kids and you have a family and a business. So it's like you want to have the autonomy to choose and say, hey, I think I want oatmeal this morning, or, oh, my family's having this. I can have this too, but I'm just going to have this amount. So that's to me the ultimate freedom that comes along with it.
Yeah. And so many people, what I have personally learned is like so many people, myself included, was like, oh, well, like protein, or it's a certain caloric allotment. Like that's what we're kind of focusing on with macros. And I have found the most success, both like with my metabolism, but also like how I feel, like my digestion, my energy, I'm like mood essentially, when I'm more focused on the balance of the macronutrients, like not like, my protein and carbs might be like dialed, but then, oh, my fat's really low. Well, then like, I'm actually not going to feel very good. My digestion gets shot. That doesn't feel good. So then I'm like, oh, nope, I got to get those fats way up. So then they're more in balance with protein and carbs, for example. But I think it's really easy to almost have like one of the macronutrients kind of dip for a lot of women. Obviously, it's like protein, and they're just protein is low, super low levels. But then carbs are really high. Maybe fats are really high. So when you can kind of get in more harmony with your macros, I feel like that's actually what makes a huge difference, especially for women.
Yes.
What have you seen with like your clients with some of that stuff?
Yeah, it's so true. I think it's really easy too when you're not aware of even all of the macros. If you're losing weight for the first time ever in your life, focusing on calories and proteins is probably enough for you in the beginning for a long time. But once you get into it, and especially if you're doing something like something really, combative, or you're competing in any kind of sport, those macros serve different purposes for your performance. Like fat is going to be a big indicator of your hormones. If it's way too low, you might skip your period. You might have some issues come up there hormonally. If you are way too low with your carbs, you're going to feel like crap in your training. You're not going to be able to push very hard, right? So it's like they all have their importance. And I think that a lot of women, because we're so programmed to go low carb, it's the first thing they want to cut. And when I start looking at women's macros, like the athletes that I see, it's like the fats are up here, the protein's like, and the carbs are down here. Yeah. And sometimes even keeping their calories the same, but then just doing a little bit of Tetris and raising the protein and raising the carbs and lowering the fat, it's like all of a sudden the weight starts falling off with the same amount of calories. So it's not always true for everybody. Like I said, if you're a woman or newly postpartum, you're losing weight for the first time in your life, you probably don't need all that stuff. Just calorie goal is in protein is probably fine. But if you're competing, I think for sure those make a big difference.
Yeah. So how does somebody who's listening to this, like find out, okay, like how much do I need to be eating? And a lot of women I have found, typically think that they need to eat around like 12 to like 1400 calories every day. We know that is way too low, but that's also like some of what has been beaten into our head through like diet culture. So what would you say like is a good strategy for figuring out realistic calories for a pretty active woman?
Yeah. It's hard because it's subjective, there's so many factors, but I would say first and foremost, if somebody wants to know, you have to know how much you're eating first. Like it does me no good to just throw out an arbitrary number, right? So I think the best practice, if somebody wants to know in the beginning, just start doing a week of just auditing your own food intake. And you might be surprised to learn that like, oh, wow, I thought I was eating really clean and healthy. And maybe you are, but maybe the things you're eating too much of. And then it's just making a lot of calories. It doesn't matter if they're good foods. It just, might be too much. So I think that's the first step is finding out how much are you eating now? Because you might think in your head, like a lot of women think like, well, I only eat 1200 calories a day, but I can't lose weight. And then I go and have them track and I look and it's like, that really wasn't 1,200 calories, right? So sometimes we think we're not eating a lot, and then we start accounting the handful of chips and the half chicken nugget that we eat off our kids' plate and this and that. And it ends up being more. So that's the first step. And then there are, online resources and stuff like that. But I would be wary for like doing a macro calculator. I think the best thing to do is to reach out to somebody, right? To reach out to a coach like myself or somebody that in your network that does that, because I'm going to look at like, your macros are going to be much different than somebody else, right? How many times a day are you training? Where were you eating before? Like, what was your previous set point? How is your sleep, your stress? Do you have a menstrual cycle? Are you on birth? Like all of those things will help determine. So yes, it's tricky, right? But I think the first thing is just starting to track and just having a base of at least 100 grams protein. If I were to throw out any number, at least.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, and certainly endorse you as a coach and others that take a really practical, individualized approach to this, because it is. I mean, I haven't been able to do this, and I work in this industry, but to be able to like look at yourself and really be able to hack like what your body needs and not have like a weird bias or story attached to it. Like I needed to say hands off of my macros and had somebody say this, tell me how much you're training. Tell me what like you're eating now, and like really just kind of like get a hold of everything. And that I think is the way. We can't all be our own best coaches. We have to like, hire that out, even if it's for like a one-time, hey, this is what I think would be good for you, like a one-off consultation, maybe check in here and there. I think that can be one of the most empowering ways and probably the fastest way to see the results that you want. Because then you're not like second guessing or following a bro on Instagram who doesn't really understand your body, your training, your nutritional needs, your different, like your history with eating, all these things. Yeah. It's definitely worth it to reach out to somebody, especially like you, who gets it. And if you can like understand, I feel like if you're somebody who works with like weight sport athletes, man, like bring on general population. We got that. That is easy. Like,
100%. Hey, if your paycheck does not have anything to do with how much you weigh, right, it's going to be a whole lot like different of a ride. Versus if your paycheck, I always tell women that are not competing, like, hey, no, your boss isn't going to like dock half your pay on Friday if you're not 145 pounds, right? No? Okay, then just chill. It's okay. It's just a fluctuation. No big deal. Look at the other things. Look over here.
I know it is a crazy world that like, you kind of start to see more of, is just like the different extremes that exist. Even as we have more information, there's still just like circles of the fitness industry, and that includes the combat sports world that just, they're just a little bit behind in best practices, especially for women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what advice do you have for maybe a young woman who's starting out in a combat sport? What would you tell her about navigating that whole scene as it relates to her body and her training and her longevity?
I would say, especially if it's a young woman who's starting as an amateur, or you're competing in BJJ, competing in jiu-jitsu or kickboxing, or even just boxing alone, and you're at the amateur level, don't kill yourself for free. Get the experience. Don't beat up your body and your metabolism and destroy your body before you reach it to that level. Because I definitely made that mistake where I had too hard of cuts early on, too many injuries early on, too many, bouts of overtraining. And, in the beginning, that's your chance to practice. That's your chance to learn how to compete when the stakes aren't really high. So get that experience without having to like constantly torture yourself. Compete at a higher weight class, try different weight classes in jiu-jitsu and see where you feel best, right? And just have fun. Don't take it too serious, because as a retired athlete, I'm here to say those are the best days of your life. You're right. They're gonna go like this. And it's just, I think it's something where we get so caught up in it and we get so stressed and we have all the pressure and we want to do better that we don't always enjoy it. So that would be my advice, get all of the experience. Don't beat yourself up early in the beginning, save your body for later on if you are pursuing the higher level, while still training and competing your hardest, and have fun. Like have fun, because you will miss it someday. Like it is, there's certain things you can't always do forever. You're in the moment and you got to enjoy it.
Absolutely. So what do you personally have going on? Are you still training in combat sports at all? Like, are you doing jiu-jitsu, or have you kind of pulled back from that and just kind of focus on other aspects of fitness? Where are you at in your own process?
Yeah. So right now I'm not currently training. I've had some big life shifts. And so I'm still in the season of life where I'm trying to find my footing back into the combat sport world. I do have a 2-year-old. I'm a stay-at-home mom and I run the online business. So it's a lot. So I work out at the gym. My passion is also weightlifting. I love weightlifting. And side note, that's another overlooked aspect in the combat world is building strength, because nobody wants to get bulky and, all of that. But it's so important to weight train. So that's been my passion, is to continue weight training right now until we reach a point probably similar to your motherhood journey, where like she's in school soon. I have a couple of hours free during the day. I can go back into training. But I have trained, over the years here and there. Now it's just kind of navigating this new part of life that we're in. But yeah, other than that, I'm just, happy to be helping women in this area, and just super grateful to be able to impact like the next generation.
Yeah. Because when did you become a pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach? How long ago was that? Was that when you were?
It was, I started the course when I was pregnant. Yeah. So 2021, the end of 2021. I had my daughter September of 2021. So that's when I found you. I found your course. Everybody said you were the best. And that was at a time where you had to like wait. So I had to like wait until the round started or whatever. You were only doing it twice a year. So you've come a long way as well. But even at that time in 2020, you were already like the expert. So I'm just super honored to be a part of it. And it truly is the best. Like you truly have the best, course, the best resources, the best network of coaches. Like it's truly been amazing.
Oh, well, thanks for saying that. And yeah, it's been quite a ride. It's evolved a lot over the years, but I think the coolest part is it's just connected me with like people like you that are doing cool stuff, like through your own way, and like kind of taking what you learned there, but then like applying it uniquely to your training, to your body, to your life, or to the clients that you're working with. And, we're going to keep seeing more and more moms who are wanting to train through pregnancy, train through postpartum. Like they don't need to be bought in that like their athleticism doesn't end. They're like, yeah, we know that now. Like that's like the new generation, which is so freaking awesome. And, I think it's just going to be really cool to see, especially as the combat sports world continues to grow for women and mothers, that they have sane resources like you who can help guide some of those, different considerations. Because I think once you become a mom too, like you are so desperate to find aspects of your identity again. You don't realize that there's like, that identity doesn't die. It just kind of grows with you and evolves a bit as your journey continues. Just like if and when you go back into any kind of combat sport, it hasn't left you. It's still there. It's just been paused during the season of life. And like, that's okay. We have to start giving more grace and having conversations around that too.
Yeah. And I think we live in the best time to be a female athlete, where like you've been highlighting, we're seeing Olympic athletes breastfeeding on the side with little tiny babies in their back competing as the best in the world. That's so inspiring. Seeing somebody like, I know you're training Carla Esparza, like coming back into her training, like seeing other women. And even for me, like seeing some women that are maybe 40 that are like still fighting, 41, 42. Like we haven't seen that. That didn't exist when I was 20. So it's really, we're seeing girls out of high school that know they want to be professional fighters. And they're fighting at 21 years old in the UFC. I mean, it's insane. It is the best time for women to be an athlete, whatever age you are, even if you're postpartum or you're older or you're in school still or whatever. It's truly the best time. So.
It is. And it's been so exciting to be part of like that little wave of momentum. And now we just like keep it going and with our own unique voices and areas of expertise. And that's why I'm so grateful that you're out there doing the work that you are doing. And where can people learn like more about you? Where can they work with you? What are your resources?
So, primarily Instagram or Facebook at Trisha Cicero. Just my name is my handle. I have a monthly membership that people can be a part of where you can just learn how much you should be eating and have simple workouts you can do. I also offer like one-time macros. If somebody wants to know how much should I be eating, I'll give you macros and check in with you a month later and see how you're doing. Or I have many women that work with me one-on-one and, we just kind of take that journey together of making sure you feel your best and you're truly able to lose weight without doing all of the extreme shit all of the time.
Yeah. I love it. Well, we will link all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your time. And this conversation was awesome. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practice Brave podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review and help us spread the work we are doing to improve the overall information and messaging in the fitness industry and beyond. Now, if you are pregnant and you are looking for a trustworthy exercise program to follow, I have you covered. The Pregnant Athlete Training Program is a well-rounded program for pregnancy with workouts for each week that are appropriate for your changing body. That's 36 weeks of workouts, 3 to 4 workouts each week, and tons of guidance on exercise strategy. We also have an at-home version of that program. If you are postpartum and you're looking for an exercise program to follow, the 8-week postpartum athlete training program would be a really great way to help bridge the gap between rehab and the fitness you actually want to do. From there, we have the Practice Brave Fitness program, which is an ongoing strength and conditioning program where you get new workouts each week and have a lot of guidance from myself and my co-coach, Heather Osby. This is the only way that I'm really offering ongoing coaching at this point in time. If you have ever considered becoming a certified pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach, I would love to have you join us. Pregnancy and Postpartum Athleticism is a self-paced online certification course that will up-level your coaching skills and help connect the dots between pelvic health and long-term athletic performance, especially during pregnancy and postpartum. Become who you needed and become who your online and local community needs by becoming a certified pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach. Thank you again for listening to the Practice Brave podcast. I appreciate you. And please help me continue spreading this messaging, this information, and this work.